Hey people, as you probably know, I was at the Amazing Spider-Man panel at San Diego Comic-Con last week, and I was not able to record the movie footage that they showed because they have very tight security there to make sure that you're not recording anything. And even if you do record it, if you post it on YouTube, they are very good about finding that kind of stuff and taking it down from YouTube, and didn't want to get in trouble either way. So I do want to do my best to describe the footage shown, just to give you an idea of what's going on with the movie and the tone of things. So I'm going to do my best. It has been a few days now, so the scenes aren't as fresh in my mind, but I'll do what I can to describe them accurately. Some of the early scenes they showed were just to kind of set the high school tone of what's going on with Peter Parker's life. They showed Peter Parker, I think he was at his locker, and Flash Thompson throws a basketball at it, and he's just being usual kind of Flash Thompson douchebag and picking on Peter, giving him a hard time. And it later shows them in gym class or something, or I think Flash Thompson is probably on the basketball team, and Peter gets the ball, and he says to Flash, "Why don't you come over here and take it away from me?" So Flash looks at his friends on the team like, what the hell, what's wrong with Peter Parker? Of course I can take the ball with him, he's not athletic, this is puny Parker. So he looks like, okay, I'm about to just handle this. And it cuts away from that scene. I think they want to save that for the movie, but they have kind of released images before of what I believe happens in this scene, and it looks like this is Peter after he's gotten his powers, and he definitely uses his abilities to embarrass Flash and just school him. And it later cuts to another scene. This one I definitely know. Peter is at his locker, and Flash Thompson comes up to him. Peter grabs him and slams him against the locker, and it doesn't show what happens after that, but you then see Peter and Uncle Ben in the principal's office, and the principal's telling him that Peter, I think, beat up and humiliated Flash. And you see this scene where Uncle Ben and Peter are walking down the hallway, and Uncle Ben is really lecturing Peter about what he did, and he's like, well, these guys deserved it. And Uncle Ben asks if if Flash was the guy who beat him up earlier, because I'm pretty sure he had come home with bruises before. And Peter doesn't really answer, but he kind of acknowledges that yes, it was the guy. He's like, oh, so you're feeling pretty good about yourself. And you can tell that Peter is happy about what he did. And Uncle Ben kind of gives him a lecture about how this is wrong, and it's very similar to the scene in the first Spider-Man movie where Uncle Ben is dropping Peter off at the library or something, and he just gives him the talk about power and responsibility. The tone of it's very similar, and the themes that are going on in there. The only real major difference I see is that in the first movie, with that scene, Peter was kind of aggressive towards Uncle Ben and defensive about it, whereas in this one, Peter just kind of takes it. And then there's some good humor at the end of it. I don't want to spoil that for you, but it transitions into a scene with Peter and Gwen Stacy, and Peter is awkwardly trying to ask Gwen out on a date, and you can see she's kind of fond of Peter, and she's kind of sarcastic, and it establishes her personality a little bit, and it's an amusing scene. In the teaser trailer, they showed Peter finding his dad's old bag, but they didn't show what was in the bag. In this footage, they showed a little bit more of the contents of this bag. His dad's old glasses are in the bag, as well as his Oscorp ID badge, among other things. So they revealed that his dad worked for Oscorp, and I believe that is where Kirk Connors works. So there's kind of an interesting connection, and I'm pretty sure that Norman Osborn isn't in this movie, and I'm pretty sure that Harry isn't in this movie either, but I think it is building towards eventually having Norman Osborn enter this movie series. So that's pretty interesting. And they had another scene with Peter tinkering with something, and it looked like I think he was trying to create the web shooters in this scene, but it was kind of hard to tell for me. There's a scene with Peter fighting these muggers on a subway, and he's in his civilian clothes, so I believe this is probably the first serious fighting situation that Peter has been placed in since he's gotten his powers, and it's probably a very important scene on the road to becoming Spider-Man because it shows him that he can actually take on criminals with his powers. There's also a scene with him as Spider-Man where he takes down a criminal. It starts off as this guy breaks into a car and Spider-Man is sitting in the backseat of the car, and he says to him, "Just a tip, if you're planning on stealing a car, you might not want to dress like a car thief." And the guy looks at him and he's like, "Are you a cop?" And then Spider-Man's like, "Seriously? I'm dressed in red and blue tights and you think I'm a cop?" And it cuts to another scene. I believe it's just this scene further along, but skipping to save some time. The guy pulls out a knife. They're outside the car at this point. The guy pulls out a knife, and Peter just decides to screw with him a little bit. He's like, "Oh my gosh, is that a knife? Okay, please don't hurt me. Is that a knife? Oh my gosh!" And then he just eventually just webs the guy's knife, webs the guy to the wall, and is just really having fun with it and screwing with the guy. And I thought it was a great scene. It was very funny, and it really showed this kind of playful, wisecracking side of Spider-Man that I really want to see in the movie. And hopefully that's in more scenes than just this scene, and just kind of carries throughout the movie and any future movies that they do. Because it was a very cool tone for Spider-Man, and it felt very right. Another scene that they showed in the teaser that was expanded upon in this was the scene in which Peter eats dinner with Gwen Stacy and her family. The conversation that's going on in the scene is kind of played over a montage of clips, and it features Captain Stacy asking Peter what he thinks of Spider-Man, and Peter basically says that he thinks that Spider-Man is doing the same thing that Captain Stacy. He's just trying to protect the people and take down the bad guys. And then Captain Stacy says that I'm about law and order, this guy is wearing a mask, and he's basically kind of taking the angle that Jameson usually takes against Spider-Man, that Spider-Man is not working with the system, so he's not good for the city, he's just out of control and just needs to be stopped and needs to stop doing what he's doing. So there's some tension between Captain Stacy and Spider-Man. I'm not sure how much that's like the traditional comics, but in the Spectacular Spider-Man, Captain Stacy and Spider-Man had a pretty good relationship. Spider-Man usually could work with him, he could talk to him, and things were pretty calm between them. So it'll add tension to the Gwen-Peter relationship to have her dad out to get him and his other identity. So it's a pretty interesting angle to take. Another scene that I believe was in this bigger montage of scenes that were kind of starting to show the tougher side of being Spider-Man was a scene that involved Peter and Aunt May. Aunt May finds Peter and he's kind of all bruised and beaten up, and she's asking him where he's going and who's doing these things to him, and he's kind of desperately pleading with her to just go to bed, and you can tell he's distressed, and he's probably been through something pretty bad, probably might have lost a fight to the lizard or something, but things haven't gone well, and you can tell that Peter's very distressed, and he realizes that what he's doing is not only difficult to pull off in the sense of the whole being Spider-Man and everything, but it takes a toll on his home life, and it's tough on the person who's taking care of him, because Aunt May really worries about what's going on with Peter, and he doesn't want to put her through all that. They showed a second reel of footage that was much more lizard focused. They had Peter coming to the lab at Oscorp, I believe, where Gwen works, and Kurt Connors asked a group of people how they would go about possibly regenerating an arm, and I think Peter's the one. Well, I know Peter's the one that gives the solution about mixing the DNA from something else, and Kurt Connors is visibly impressed by Peter knowing this. So while this Peter isn't as straightforward and nerdy as the past Peter was in high school, you can tell that he is very knowledgeable about science and has that element to him still. So it's very much the classic Kurt Connors story. He experiments on himself, and eventually he starts to change. And I think the lizard is in the sewer at one point, and it flashes to this high school scene with these girls in a bathroom, and the toilet starts to rumble, and all of a sudden the toilet is like thrown off, and this big hand comes up, this big green scaly hand comes up, and the lizard comes out from underneath this bathroom, and he's very big and muscular, kind of not really like the classic lizard who's more slender and creature-like. It looks a lot more like Killer Croc to me than the classic interpretation of the lizard. Like, the face is flat. You can't really see sharp teeth like you normally do with Killer Croc, but the lizard typically has more of a snout, and this lizard didn't really have a snout. It was big, and it had really big arms. So I think it is more likely to be able to go hand to hand in a more traditional fight type with Spider-Man than the more monstrous lizard, which was more like a clawing Spider-Man. This one definitely looks like it could be able to punch him pretty hard if it wanted to, as well as be able to claw him. And the lizard is very creature-like, though. It kind of comes towards these two girls who are backed against the wall and sniffs them, sticks out its tongue, and it cuts away before it shows the lizard doing anything to him, but it's very likely that the lizard killed these two girls. So that footage was pretty interesting. The lizard looks decent. It's still early on, so the effects probably weren't finished, but I think the lizard looks pretty decent. Overall, throughout all the footage I saw, things were pretty good. The biggest message I took away from this was that Andrew Garfield is going to make a really good Peter Parker. Like, I've been kind of willing to accept Andrew as Peter, but you always have to be cautious with these things. You don't want to just assume that somebody's going to do a great job, or just be quick to say that, oh no, they're going to be terrible. But in the footage shown, he was a very good Peter and a very good Spider-Man. So I'm pretty much sold on Andrew as Peter at this point, and I think he's going to do very well in the movie. The general tone of things, I think the movie seems to have a good balance between the humor and some more intense aspects, which should be good. The one thing that I wasn't too sure about was that it seemed to have a lot of kind of contemporary rock music in it, and it's not like a personal taste thing, but in general I feel that these kind of movies should stick to a mainly orchestral score. Like, the previous Spider-Man movies had like mostly orchestral stuff except for like during the credits, and I just feel that this helps to make a movie age a lot better when you don't have the music of the time as the music that's playing throughout it. You just have music that's pretty universal and timeless. Like Superman the movie, I feel, even though it looks and feels like an older movie, the music doesn't feel dated in that way. Like, if there was a Superman movie that came out in the 90s and the music that they chose for it was I Just Wanna Fly, it would feel like so 90s watching it right now. Like, it would kind of reek of 90s. Like, modern music can help a movie to feel contemporary, but when you look back on it, it can just kind of really date the movie, and I'm not too sure about it. But things are looking good for the Amazing Spider-Man, so that's pretty much all I have to say.